Well, if you go to womanvision.org, you can stream it and download it. And if anybody's got any ideas, we're kind of thinking, 20 plus years, it's kind of time to get this out to the festivals again, because I think people would really, sort of a new generation might really like to see this piece of our history. So if anybody's got any ideas or knows any festival producers, we would be most grateful to hear from you, because it's it's a long time past, and I haven't maintained connections with since it first came out. And it made the festival circuit then. So, question? Yeah.
I was really excited to see. We noticed on a couple of the posters that they were from shows or tours through Smith College in Northampton. I was wondering if you did any research with their archives at Smith, because I know they have a big women's music collection.
Well, I believe that.
Well, our stuff is there.
Our stuff is there.
Yeah, our stuff is there. So yeah.
But
not even research.
I don't believe that we used their collection to research.
Your collection went to.
But what happened there was that my first career was as a librarian. So I was really into
here at MLK Library, by the way.
Well, yeah,
not your first, but in DC.
Yeah, I was actually a librarian here when I first came to DC in 1972. But so I was very interested in where all of our archives were going to go as we got older, and did research with some other women who were also historians. One, Bonnie Morris, who's from DC. And we settled on Smith College as the best place to send all our stuff because it has a strong women's rights collection. And they were very interested in the women's music. So that's why Dee's archives from Woman Vision and my archives from Woman Sound and Cassie Culver's archives, they all went there. So they love it if everyone used them and everything.
Well,
but
I have.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Oh, good. A living example. Have you been able to have you looked for?
I was just looking for fun, essentially. I studied archives at Smith, but I wasn't.
Oh, you did?
I did never do a project specifically related to women's music.
Oh.
Somebody who was, and she did stuff about Olivia Records, and so I was kind of adjacent to it. But,
interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, on that subject, I was wondering if you two could talk a little bit about the research process into all of the amazing archival footage that was in that film, because that was truly an astounding amount of history, all condensed into 88 minutes, and I want to know where you got it from.
Do you want to go?
Sorry.
Well, my first response is it was a collective effort.
It's huge.
Because it was a huge project, and I looked at Dee because she was over in San Francisco working with the editor, and how she ended up with all of the information that went in there is beyond me. I knew what I sent her. I mean, like who was the American University student? When I was there, I got a master's in audio technology while I was running Woman Sound because I wanted to know more about electronics and engineering. And I did this video course. It was an eclectic master's, so I got to do a video course. And so the clips of Woman Sound and me mixing in there, and then the women stacking the speakers, that's from my little video, and I'd forgotten that when I was at American University.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah. So there was efforts like that, and you're going to talk a little bit about the co-producers, but we had a collective of us, really. We met regularly, and they helped get a lot of that information to Dee and the editor. And I mean, we can't thank the editor enough. The woman that Lisa Ginsburg.
Lisa Ginsburg kind of finished it.
I mean,
all off.
Putting that all together is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah,
so.
And I just wanted actually to mention particularly June Millington, who co-directed, and she had a big archives herself. And she was really invaluable in helping us gather all that stuff together. And plus, she had a great network of women's musicians and so forth. So she really helped with that a lot. And then Judith Castleberry and also Margie Adam were co-producers or directors. And they were all very helpful with gathering information, but also raising money and so forth. So
Yeah, and June went around with a little video cam
Yes.
and went all around the country and caught a lot of the interviews that we couldn't catch another way. So
Exactly.
Yeah, I was gonna ask more also about like the interviews and like kind of the research process. So, like, again, who did the interviews, or did you have kind of like a set of questions that you asked people, and then also for like kind of thinking about the narrative that you wanted the documentary to tell, like how do you kind of decide on that and think about that in terms of like all the research you were collecting?
huge questions.
Huge questions.
It was
and-
such a process.
Yeah.
But
If you'd asked me about 15 or 20 years earlier, I probably would have had a more full answer. But basically, I mean, people like June and Boden and I, and we talked about the things that we had experienced in women's music ourselves, because we kind of came up, Boden, you know, developing woman sound and later city sound, and me producing concerts back in the very early days. You know, we had a sense of the growth of the movement and what it meant to people, and we wanted to show that. We wanted to show what it meant and how it developed and all of the ways in which it developed. And you know, it's just, as Boden said in the introduction, I mean, it's you know, all of the little industries, you know, the producers and the record companies, all that thing, all of those things that sprung up around us as we were sort of in DC in the early 70s. And so we wanted to show that. We wanted to show, you know, contributions such as sign language that women's music made to everywhere. I mean, sign language is everywhere now. That was us. That was women's music. So.
Yeah, and we, well, I mixed the Michigan Women's Music Festival for 15 years. In fact, I mixed all the major women's music festivals, but I talk about Michigan particularly because for me, it was like a petri dish of all the issues that went on in the lesbian community. And as soon as it became something that we really needed to talk about, let's say for S&M, for example, it would surface up at Michigan. There would be performers who were singing about it. We would have workshops, all these spontaneous workshops, and a lot of controversy, and people would get really upset, but because it was a music festival, it would get healed. You know?
That's great. Yeah, that's really good.
So, but why I made that point was that, so we were very aware of all the issues that we needed to cover because they had surfaced at the festivals and had gotten talked out.
Right. Yeah.
Great. Hi.
Hi.
Mosbacher, and thank you for this. In the end, it comes back to this documentary being filmed and the music being music. And when we think of archiving and also the quote in the film for the folk festival about there weren't any women of significant quality, how has this film or the documentary landed at the Library of Congress? And what of the music? How have the songs entered into the registry? Have you presented this into the Library of Congress to think about the annual recordings of national significance, so that we do honor these groundbreaking works for both their national significance and their quality?
I think that's a great idea, and then to my knowledge, we haven't done that yet, and absolutely would love to have help doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Because
could be screened at the Library of Congress?
yeah, I think that's
Wow.
a great idea.
Yeah.
I know someone who does their LGBTQ work.
All right.
We've got someone on the board who runs their. We know Andrew, but we know a bunch of
that's
people at Library
great.
of
Oh,
Congress.
that would be really
That's
cool.
great.
Another
Yeah,
excuse to
because
come
more
back
and
in.
more, I mean, I've really gotten back into my archival work and realized that, you know, there's so much that can be done in terms of that kind of thing. So definitely would like to get on it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for asking. That's really great
Good
idea.
question.
Yeah.
I'm curious, I guess it's about 22 years after the documentary came out, what you think has changed about women's music. I know there was Lilith Fair like in the 90s, and it came back I think in 2010, and then it just seems to kind of have disappeared, and I kind of wish that there were more women's music festivals out there. That's always been a dream of mine, to go to like a women's music festival. I know Brandy Carlisle does some, but I'm curious what you think has changed, and like whether you think this is still needed, because I do.
Oh, thank you. That's great. Well, we're old now, and so I will leave it. I just turned 75 this year.
78.
And older, but anybody who's got the energy to, recreate, or not recreate, but create on a totally different level, that kind of thing is more than welcomed. And really love the idea of the Library of Congress too.
There are. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and I think it stopped me if I said this before, but I think well, I did say before that it's sort of time for to go back to the festivals and sort of get it out again. So the film festivals. Yeah, sorry.
There are festivals cropping up, though. We just had one at Rehoboth Beach in Delaware. It was wonderful. I was telling Frankie and Kate that a lot of the younger musicians, they were there, and I don't know how these producers found everybody. They were women from Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, and from here. And I'm going to look up the names of the artists that came from here, and they were all fabulous. And they were just like what they were talking about in our film, that they were just radical and political and out there. And I mean, I was just mesmerized. So, and I see more of them popping up. So I think there's a resurgence of need for that. Yeah, definitely.
That's great. Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah, I have another question. Can you talk a little bit more about what it was like to reconnect with some people to film this documentary? Because I know a lot of them were people that you all knew back in the day, and I don't know if you stayed in touch with them all those many years, or if you kind of had to circle back and find each other again. But I think it's very beautiful.
Well, for me, I did stay in touch, mainly because I did the festivals for so long, and then because I was teaching. I stayed in touch on that basis. And so the core of us, it didn't feel like we ever let go of each other. And so then it was a matter of everybody fanning out and finding the women to interview and stuff. I mean, when we were making the film, the women's community, in my opinion, was still strong. So it's not like we had a big gap or anything.
Yeah. Exactly, right.
And that a lot of those interviews were done in my house in Tacoma Park. Like where Hazel Dickens was and Bernice Johnson Reagan was. That's all my house.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say it was so great. We didn't show it here in D.C. for some reason. I don't know why when it first came out, but I had to let go of how much we were talking about the D.C. community. Mm-hmm. So it was so cool to hear that here in this context, and that so much happened here.
That's really great. Yes.
I have one. So it's been 20 years since the film, 50 years since you got started in this work. Did you know when you were starting that this was a major historical thing that you were building in the 70s, that you were part of making history? Were you aware of that at all?
Not really.
I think you're just in the middle of it. And Boden should speak more than I, because I was off doing other kinds of things and, became a documentary filmmaker and did other documentaries. But I started off producing, and I was but we were kind of in the middle of it, and I'm not sure we thought about it that way.
Yeah, no, I think who was it? I can't think who it was in the film who said, I think it was Alex Dobbin, we did it because we had to. We had to have it. Yeah. So, yeah.
Exactly.
So we really weren't thinking about history that way. We were thinking about changing history. I mean, so many of us came from the left-wing political movements, and so been active in civil rights and the anti-war movement. So it's not like we were clueless about that. We knew we were changing the world, but the women's music movement was different in that way. I mean, we weren't in the streets at rallies. We were building we were building our own culture.
Right. Yes.
I'm Dee's spouse and of 50 years almost. And I would also say that we were bringing people out one person at a time.
Yeah.
I too am a psychiatrist, and it was a time when the world was closeted for the most part, and so mental health was the path through the door to coming out, and so that was a big part of this women's music cultural movement. I mean, people joined in song, and as they and the community and the connection, and came out, and that was such a beautiful thing. That we were really doing that one person at a time.
Yeah, yeah. I thank you. I meant what I said in the beginning. I mean that really. So many of us. I mean, I'll just speak for myself. You know, when I was first starting to come out or thinking that I was a lesbian, you know, I really didn't know. I only knew from, you know, mental health books and, you know, other kinds of things that did not make me want to be what was described in there. And it really took me in DC, you know, coming to a rally that said, that advertised on the flyer. I was at GW taking some pre-med classes, and I saw this flyer that said, you know, come to a rally about back then it was pro-abortion rights, and it said it would have a doctor, a lawyer, and a lesbian speaker. And so I went, and I was really bummed because nobody identified as a lesbian speaker, but I saw these women, and they were so like normal and like the regular people. I thought, well, this is, you know, I'm one of those, you know, I can be like that.
You're the lesbian.
Yeah, I'm not. I became the lesbian speaker, then I was just the watcher, but yeah, right. So, you know, what I was trying to say was there's so many people, and I was on a coast, so many people out in the Midwest who, you know, or in Texas or wherever, who, you know, thought that we were the only ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have another question sort of reflecting on 20 years looking back at making this documentary. I'm wondering if you have any standout memories of what it was like to bring together and work with these artists. If there's anyone's interview who really stands out in your mind, or anything maybe that we didn't get to see in the documentary about what it was like to work with all those amazing artists.
I can't answer it that way because I lived and breathed with all those artists. See, I did the circuit, so I was with all of those people for 20 years, you know, doing the sound.
Yeah.
So they were all my friends. So
Yeah,
you
right.
know, but you know, I mean, some of the remarks really have stood out for me, and I think people really did capture of what was going on in more eloquent ways than I can ever imagine that we could articulate what we were doing. But, you know, like Judith Castleberry and Bernice Johnson Reagan, and I mean, it's just incredible the insight that they all had on what we went through and what we did.
Yeah.
I think that's what stood out for me, how insightful everybody was, you know, to be
Yeah.
able to capture what happened. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for me, we did a concert in the course of making the film at Boo Price's club.
Yeah.
And it was real, and that was when people were, you know, those folks who were in the film as younger individuals, you know, came and performed, and it was obviously they were older, we were all older, but it hit me again and brought me back to the beginnings for me, which was in the early 70s in Washington D.C. So it was really fantastic to get to produce that and see it. So.
Yeah, and we were very fortunate to be able to film at the 25th anniversary of Michigan.
I think it's,
And that was just so amazing because prior to that, the rules on the land was no photographs. You know, everyone valued their privacy so much, and people needed it to be safe, and they talked about how important it was to stay safe. And Lisa Vogel, the director of the festival, decided this was really important. And so we were there on the land with our RV and our cameras, and you know, everyone cooperated, And it was really great because it was cold, so everyone was fairly clothed. Because we couldn't quite figure out how we were going to do that. So it worked. But so a lot of the footage came from that festival.
Yeah, right. Any other questions or anything?
It's not a question, but I just wanted to comment. One of the women in there said something about the first, like, everyone's introduction to rhythm came from the woman's heartbeat. That was amazing. I was I need to write that down and remember
Yes.
that.
Ubaka Hill.
Yeah, exactly, Ubaka Hill. Yeah.
Yeah. She was amazing.
Yeah,
she was always
she was.
amazing to work with.
Yeah.
Was there any friction between the lesbian groups and the just other women groups, straight women groups?
On the land or in communities?
In communities, or presenting the festival, and I don't know. Sometimes there's friction between just musical groups with one another all the time. Festivals and concert events. And I'm just wondering if that ever came up at all, or was it just a non-issue?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say from that point of view, no. I mean, the discussion Linda Shear had about lesbian separatism and having concerts be lesbian only. I mean, every town did experience that. We had that here because that was really radical, and hard for people. And that's why the name of it remained women's music festivals, because not everyone was lesbian, and not everyone who was lesbian was sexual. I mean, gender identities, was very fluid way back then. So the only thing that made sense was to continue saying women's music. But almost all these events and these companies and everything were lesbian centered. So that kind of controversy wasn't really happening. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah. Well, thank you all again for coming so much. I really appreciate it. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.